Human existence is characterized by a strange paradox. We suffer more the more we cling. As though life were some kind of huge game of possession, we strive for things like love, stability, prosperity, and validation. However, we only discover worry and the never-ending fear of losing things in this frantic clinging. We bind ourselves to ideas, people, and expectations. Being detached does not mean being apathetic or fleeing. It is the understanding that we are free, because nothing actually belongs to us. You see, everything is moving all the time. Everything shifts. Relationships change throughout time. Situations change. People lose their identities. When the inevitable occurs, it hurts more the harder you cling on. Nevertheless, a miracle happens the instant you let go. Without the burden of control, life starts to go smoothly. Imagine observing the waves below, from the edge of a cliff. Your mind racing, your muscles stiffen, and anxiety takes hold if you fight the wind. However, ease emerges when you trust the movement and lean into it. This is the core of detachment, embracing life's fleeting character rather than rejecting it. Change torments you more, the more you fight it. You get more in tune with the beat of life itself, the more you let go. Because they confuse detachment with loss, people are afraid of it. They believe that I shall have nothing if I let go. In actuality, though, you have everything when you let go. What you own, who thinks well of you, and the roles you perform no longer define you. You are in your most authentic self, fluid, limitless, and living. The never-ending cycle of misery ends, along with the craving for control. What's left is there. Peace is what's left. To quit clinging to life, as though it were something that could be owned, one must only make a choice, come to a revelation, and be willing to let go. And everything changes when you give up control. There is a strange way in which people cause their own misery. Our bonds are not imposed by the outside world, fate, or some other power. It is our own unrelenting attachment. We cling desperately to people, objects, identities, and ideas in the hopes that by doing so, we will be able to control, secure, and make our lives predictable. It is impossible to possess life, however. Like the wind, it moves, shifts, and changes. And we are at odds with its nature, the instant we attempt to capture it. Think about love. As soon as they fall in love, people start to fear losing it, making it last, making sure it doesn't change, making sure the person they love stays the same forever, becomes their obsession. Nevertheless, love. Possession is not the essence of true love. You can't just put it in a box and leave it that way. It begins to wane the instant you attempt to possess it. You start to feel nervous and in control, constantly searching for clues that it's vanishing. However, was it ever yours in the first place? Or was it just a river that nourished you as it went by, an experience that you couldn't hold in your hands? Success is no different. A person puts in years of effort to acquire wealth, fame, or a position of authority, and once they do, they start to fear losing it. The fear of the journey's conclusion takes the place of its joy. Desperate to maintain their position, they cling on. To stop change, to stop life's natural course from robbing them of what they feel they have earned. But everything is subject to time, regardless of how firmly they hold on. Fortunes fluctuate, the mind changes, the body ages, and reputations vary. Nevertheless, people resist this beat instead of going with it. Because they are unable to accept the fact of life, they produce stress, anxiety, and despair. That nothing can be genuinely owned, nothing is permanent, and nothing is fixed. Examine the connections. Families, marriages, and friendships all rely on a fine balance that is constantly changing and evolving. However, Suffering is introduced the instant we want to freeze them, to maintain them exactly as they were in a beautiful time in the past. We put demands on other people, expecting them to act in ways that suit our preferences. By kid, as though these designations might stop people from developing, evolving, and becoming their true selves. However, individuals are not fixed objects that can be stored in one location, nor are they possessions. However, because of our attachment, we feel betrayed by life when they change, which hurts us, when, in reality, it has simply carried on with its natural path. Even who we are turns become a prison. We cling to stories we tell ourselves about our identity, past, successes, and failures, as though they determine who we are. We say, I am this type of person. That's not what I do. This is who I am. As a result, we confine ourselves because we are afraid to deviate from the carefully cultivated image. However, the self is not a static entity. It is not an inflexible, fixed identity. It is a constant unfolding that is fluid and ever-changing. Nevertheless, we struggle because we cling to a notion of who we are and oppose this change. Where there might be comfort, pain, where there might be... In actuality, sorrow results from our opposition to existence, rather than from its inherent character. We attempt to dam a river that flows. As the seasons shift, we want to preserve summer indefinitely. People come and leave, and rather than celebrating their time here, we lament their departure. We endure hardships because we think that things ought to remain the same, and that we ought to be able to cling to memories, people, and experiences. But this is not how life is. Additionally, we cause ourselves stress, anxiety, and pain when we oppose life. However, there is an alternative. Take a moment to picture someone standing in the water. They struggle, exhaust themselves, and feel as though they are drowning if they fight the waves, or tense up and attempt to stop the water's motion. However, they discover serenity if they give up, if they let themselves float, if they move with the waves, instead of against them. There has been no alteration in the ocean. Their relationship with the sea has changed, but they still rise and fall. This is detachment's power. It has nothing to do with denying or avoiding life. Instead of going against it, it's about flowing with it. It's about living each moment to the fullest, without clinging to it or attempting to prolong it. It is about living without insisting that life live up to our expectations, about attaining without fear of loss, and about loving without possessing. Pain goes away when you let go. You give up fighting against reality. You let go of things that were never really yours in the first place. The world is constantly changing. It has been, and will continue to be. Will you suffer while trying to keep it still, or will you move with it? The concept of separation is widely misunderstood. Many people associate the phrase with being aloof, uncaring, or emotionally detached from life. They picture someone who doesn't give a damn, who abandons relationships, success, or love without feeling anything. However, this is avoidance, not detachment, and fear still manifests itself in avoidance. Being completely present in the world without being trapped by it is what true detachment is all about, not rejecting it. It is the difference between softly holding a bird in your hands and letting it rest, and suffocating it by holding it too tightly. That's what you're attempting to preserve. Take a look at how people deal with love. It's, I love you. However, they frequently signify that in order for me to feel safe, I need you to act in a particular way. They think that control would bring stability, so they impose expectations, conditions, and invisible chains on the individuals they say they love. However, love is not something that is confined. You are no longer loving when you transform it into a possession, something that needs to fit into a certain pattern in order to satisfy you. Furthermore, fear, not love, is the primary cause of clutching. Being attached does not imply that you lack profound affection. It indicates that you love completely and fearlessly. When you love someone, you don't expect them to change, leave, or let you down. You are as much in love as someone who appreciates a sunset for what it is at that very moment, without trying to capture it in a photograph or freeze it in time. Additionally, the love stays pure and vibrant since you are not connected to managing it, free from the fear of ownership. Think about ambition. A common misconception about detachment is that it entails not aiming for anything, giving up on success, or giving up aspirations. Detachment, however, does not equate to inaction. It does not imply a life devoid of endeavor, development, or aspirations. A detached person chases achievement for the sake of the process itself, but an attached person does so because they feel that it is necessary for their pleasure. A person is a prisoner of results. One is free. Consider someone who pursues wealth because they are certain that they will feel safe and worry-free once they achieve a particular amount. But when they arrive, they experience restlessness and emptiness. As a result, they establish a new objective, milestone, and number. The cycle never stops. They cling to the notion that contentment lies in the future, always just out of reach. They never show up. They are never at rest. They never feel sufficient. Now take a peek at a disconnected person. They might also labor hard, build, and create. However, their energy is distinct. They are not deluded by the idea that they will find happiness when they cross the finish line. They are aware that doing, not the result, is what brings enjoyment. They move with purpose and passion, but not with a desperate need to cling. They are also neither imprisoned by success or crushed by defeat, since they are not attached. Although detachment is the ultimate expression of presence, it is frequently mistaken for indifference. You are here, right now, when you are disconnected. You are not carrying the past with you, or preoccupied with concerns about the future. You notice stuff. You are living life to the fullest, without the pain that comes from attempting to make things be a certain way, instead of viewing it through the warped prism of desire and fear. Consider the ocean. It makes no attempt to hold on to its waves. It doesn't cling on to every ripple. Neither does it oppose the ebb and flow of the tides. It just flows freely and eternally, letting everything come and go at its own pace. The path of detachment is one of flow rather than resistance or avoidance. Because they are afraid of the unknown, people cling to control. They seek security, promises, and guarantees in an intrinsically unpredictable world. Attachment to control, however, is a myth. No matter how hard you try, life will change. The unavoidable ebb and flow of circumstances cannot be stopped by any amount of clutching. However, this is the dilemma. You feel at peace when you let go of the craving for control. Imagine gripping a rope and pulling as hard as you can, your hands burning and your muscles stiff. Imagine letting go now. The ease, the relief, the lightness. This is how alienation feels. Other than your desire to let go, nothing has changed. You come to the realization that you were never really holding anything at all throughout that release. Being detached does not equate to being passive. It gives you strength. You don't get cold from it. It brings you into the present moment. You are no longer behaving fearfully, no longer worn out by pursuing things that were never meant to be held, no longer chained by aspirations. You live fully, move freely, and love sincerely because you are flowing rather than clutching. The mind is always looking for safety. It's trying to cling to something, to establish a lasting foundation and define oneself by it. However, nothing is really permanent in life. not our perceived selves, not our relationships, nor our belongings. In an attempt to create stability in a constantly changing world, people spend their lives denying this reality and tying their sense of self to transient objects. Examine how individuals define themselves. I am my work, my reputation, my relationships, and my views, they say. However, what occurs if these factors shift? What happens if the relationship dies, the reputation is damaged, the job is lost, or the beliefs change? When someone bases their identity on these things, they suffer, due to the fact that they have attached their sense of self to something that is not themselves and was never intended to last. Detachment does not mean giving up on life. The goal is to break the delusion that you are your attachments. Your status does not define you. You are not what you own. Even the narrative you have told yourself about yourself is not who you are. These things are all but layers. Roles and temporary masks are performed for a while before being removed. You become inflexible, afraid of change, and desperate to preserve an unfitting self-image when you believe in any one of them too much. Consider a tree. Examine the connections. When someone comes into your life, there is love, connection, and growth for a while. However, what if things change in the relationship? What if they take different routes? Instead of letting things change organically, many people will cling to them out of fear and a frantic desire to maintain the status quo. They smother the very thing they were attempting to preserve in the process. Walking away from love is not the definition of detachment. It's about loving without having anything. It's about accepting things as they are, without attempting to fix them. Examine individual accomplishments. A person creates a career and a business. They make a reputation for themselves and put in endless effort because they think that they would feel fulfilled after they achieve a particular degree of success. However, they are terrified when they arrive, not wanting to lose it, fearful of being overlooked, fearful of change. They are too preoccupied with safeguarding their success to enjoy it. This is the attachment trap. It persuades you that happiness is dependent on something outside of yourself and needs to be protected at all costs. Think about the mind itself. The mind is continuously narrating, identifying, and attempting to define your identity. This is me. This is not me, it says. It creates barriers between oneself and others, between the present and the future, and between achievement and failure. It fosters attachments to concepts as well as objects. Furthermore, a thought turns become a prison once it is gripped too tightly. Observe a person who is devoted to correctness. Because their identity is linked to their beliefs, they protect, debate, and refuse to consider other viewpoints. Who are they if they are mistaken? As a result, they struggle, cling, and suffer. They have made their sense of self reliant on a belief, not because the reality hurts. However, there is no need to defend the truth. Attachment is not necessary. It just is. A truly free individual is not constrained by the need to be correct, to be perceived in a particular way, or to have control over the course of their life. They don't fear the unknown, or oppose change. Since their identity was never found in those outside objects, they are aware that it cannot be lost. Consider a river. It doesn't hold on to any one aspect of its path. It doesn't pause and declare, "I have to remain in this bend forever." It does not flow naturally. Rather, the terrain shapes it, and the seasons alter it. This is the detachment method, not avoidance or inactivity, but acceptance of life's constant change and an openness to change. You become flexible, adaptive, and free when you let go of your identity. Since you realize that nothing can ever be genuinely lost, you are no longer terrified of losing anything. Like a cloud in the sky, the self you believed you were was only ever a transient shape that changed and evolved over time. And there is calm in this understanding. The mind's opposition to the occurrences is what causes suffering, not the events themselves. The mind persists even as life changes. People come and go, and situations change. Instead of accepting life as it is, it clings to what was, what ought to be, and what it expected. Suffering results from this resistance, this internal conflict against the transience of things. Watch the attachment of the mind. It clings to the agonies of the past, practicing them repeatedly, as though doing so might allow it to change the course of history. It reaches into the future, spinning countless possibilities, yearning for security, as though it could prevent discomfort by controlling what hasn't happened yet. However, life doesn't work the way the mind wants it to. It doesn't care about individual expectations. It moves as it will. Therefore, one suffers more, the more they attempt to hold on. Think of someone who has been harmed, abandoned, deceived, or wronged by someone else. The mind retains the hurt, even after it has vanished. It reenacts the event, gives it significance, and explains why it is suffering. The event itself is no longer the source of the sorrow. It lies in the unwillingness to let it go. The individual feels that they are preserving something by clinging to the hurt. Maybe a feeling of fairness. Maybe a feeling of righteousness. Maybe even an identity based on victimization. In actuality, though, they are only protecting their own misery. Suffering starts to end as soon as detachment arrives. One no longer insists on revisiting the past, not because it has been rewritten. What has already occurred can no longer be resisted. When the mind realizes it no longer has to hold, control, or continue to define itself by its wounds, it relaxes. Yes, the past did happen, but it doesn't have to be dragged about. It is not required to be worn as an identifying badge. Take a look at grief. Losing a loved one causes genuine, intense, and debilitating pain. The pain, however, stems from the mind's inability to accept the loss, as well as the loss itself. It states that this is incorrect and shouldn't have occurred. It clings to the individual, to recollections, to a life that has vanished. And sorrow arises from that clutching. Being detached does not imply that one is not in love, grieving, or experiencing emotions. It simply means that one does not fight against reality. It entails letting the heart shatter and letting the emotions flow and go in waves, without committing to the concept.